That boy will choose a bride from these three, or he'll remain a bachelor forever, the weathered rancher bellows, his calloused finger jabbing toward the heavy black seamstress standing beside two slender white women. The townsfolk snicker behind gloved hands, whispering that the large woman is merely decoration, a cruel joke to make the real choices seem sweeter. They've already planned her future. Yong Yuan de Lao Chu Nu, forever mending their clothes while watching others marry. But the rancher's brooding son, freshly returned from a failed cattle drive that cost his family dearly, sees something different in her quiet dignity. What neither the mocking crowd nor the calculating father realizes is that both outcasts harbor secrets powerful enough to reshape not just their own destinies, but the entire social order of their frontier town. When forced to choose between convenience and authenticity, will their hidden strengths forge an alliance that transforms their world, or will the weight of tradition crush their chance at something extraordinary? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The dust cloud announced Sam Thornfield's return long before his weary horse reached Cedar Ridge. Windows cracked open. Curtains twitched. The whole town knew about the cattle drive disaster that cost the Thornfield Ranch $15,000. Delilah Mae Washington kept her head down at her sewing machine as whispers floated through the general store. Fat Delilah. That's what they called her when they thought she couldn't hear. She measured fabric with steady hands while the banker's wife gossiped about Sam's failure. The bell above the door chimed. Sam stepped inside, hat pulled low, shoulders sagging under the weight of defeat. Delilah Mae glanced up. Their eyes met for a split second before he looked away. She'd known Sam since childhood, back when he'd nod politely instead of pretending she didn't exist. Big Zeke Thornfield's voice boomed across the town square that evening. Every soul in Cedar Ridge gathered around the wooden platform where the massive rancher stood like a mountain carved from granite. Sam stood beside his father, face pale as morning frost. Zeke's weathered hand gripped his son's shoulder hard enough to leave bruises. The crowd pressed closer. Delilah Mae stayed at the back, invisible as always. Zeke cleared his throat. His voice carried the authority of a man who owned half the county. My son has made costly mistakes. Cost this family dearly, time he learned responsibility. Sam's jaw tightened. He stared at his boots while his father's judgment rained down like hail. 30 days from tonight, he'll choose a bride. 3 fine young women have agreed to be considered. The banker's daughter stepped forward. Sarah Collins wore blue silk that matched her eyes. 17 years old with a waist you could span with 2 hands. The crowd murmured approval. Next came the mayor's niece. Victoria Hartwell had traveled from San Francisco, all polished manners and expensive perfume. She curtsied like she'd practiced in front of mirrors. Then Zeke pointed directly at Delilah Mae. Miss Washington has also consented to be considered. The silence hit like a physical blow. Then came the laughter. Cruel, sharp barks that cut through the evening air. Someone behind Delilah Mae whispered that Zeke had finally lost his mind. Delilah Mae's face burned. She wanted to run, to disappear into the darkness beyond the lamplight, but her feet stayed planted. Her chin stayed up. Sam's head snapped toward his father. For the first time that evening, real emotion flickered across his face. Confusion. Then something that might have been calculation. The crowd expected him to laugh too, to play along with whatever joke this was supposed to be. Instead, Sam stepped to the edge of the platform. His voice cut through the murmurs. I choose Miss Washington. The words hit the crowd like lightning. Sarah Collins gasped. Victoria Hartwell's mouth fell open. The banker's face turned purple with rage. Delilah Mae felt the world tilt sideways. Every eye in Cedar Ridge fixed on her like she was some exotic animal in a traveling show. Sam jumped down from the platform. He walked through the parted crowd until he stood before her. Up close, she could see the desperation hidden behind his steady gaze. Miss Washington, will you accept? The smart answer was no. The safe answer was no. Every instinct screamed at her to decline, to save herself from whatever humiliation was coming. Instead, she nodded once. The crowd erupted. Angry voices rose like smoke from a fire. The banker pushed toward the platform, shouting about his daughter's honor. The mayor's face matched his red vest. Big Zeke raised one massive hand. The noise died instantly. The choice is made. Weddings in 30 days. People scattered like startled birds, already rushing to spread the news. Within the hour, every household in 3 counties would know about Sam Thornfield's shocking decision. Delilah May found herself standing alone with Sam in the emptying square. The lamplight flickered across his face, revealing lines that hadn't been there before he left for the cattle drive. Why? The word slipped out before she could stop it. Sam glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because you won't try to change me. You won't expect love or romance or pretty words. You'll be grateful enough to let me figure out how to fix this mess my life has become. His honesty stung worse than the crowd's laughter. But it also revealed something important. Sam Thornfield was drowning, and he thought she was the safest life raft he could grab. What he didn't know was that Delilah May Washington had her own plans. That night she sat in Reverend Blackwell's small kitchen, sipping tea while the elderly preacher studied her with knowing eyes. "You accepted for a reason," he said. Delilah May set down her cup. 28 years I've been invisible in this town. Dismissed, mocked. Maybe it's time they learned there's more to me than they assume. Reverend Blackwell smiled. He'd been her secret teacher since childhood, sharing his late wife's books and knowledge when the world insisted she didn't deserve education. And young Thornfield? He thinks he's using me. But sometimes the person you underestimate most is the one who changes everything. Outside, Cedar Ridge slept fitfully. Gossip would flow like water come morning. The banker would rage. The mayor would plot. Big Zeke would wonder if his son had finally lost all sense. But in 30 days, Delilah May Washington would become a Thornfield. And then the real surprises would begin. Delilah May's wagon rolled up to Thornfield Ranch at dawn. She carried everything she owned in 2 worn carpet bags and a wooden trunk. The ranch hands stopped their morning chores to stare. Some shook their heads. Others just looked confused. Big Zeke waited on the front porch, arms crossed like fence posts. He nodded once when she climbed down from the wagon. No welcome, no pleasantries, just the cold acknowledgement that she now belonged to his property. "You'll take the room at the end of the hall. Stay out of my way." Sam appeared in the doorway behind his father. He looked like he'd barely slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his shirt was wrinkled from yesterday. "I'll show her around," he said. The house was bigger than any place Delilah May had ever lived. Polished wood floors, expensive furniture covered in dust sheets, family portraits stared down from the walls with disapproving eyes. Sam led her through the rooms like a man walking through a graveyard. He showed her the kitchen, the dining room, the study where his father conducted business. His voice stayed flat and distant. "The housekeeper quit last month. Father hasn't bothered replacing her." Delilah May ran her finger along a dusty table. The whole place felt abandoned, like a museum of better times. "What happened to your mother's things?" Sam stopped walking. "Packed away in the attic after she died. Father couldn't stand looking at them." That evening, Delilah May sat at the kitchen table with a stack of ledger books. Big Zeke had thrown them at her after dinner, claiming she might as well make herself useful. The numbers told a story of waste and mismanagement. Supply orders doubled and tripled. Money spent on the same materials 3 times over. Workers paid for jobs that were never completed. She found the problem within an hour. The supply manager had been skimming profits for years, ordering extra materials and selling them to neighboring ranches. The books were so poorly organized that nobody had noticed the pattern. Sam wandered into the kitchen near midnight. He found Delilah May surrounded by papers, writing notes in careful script. "You can read." It wasn't a question. She looked up from her work, pencil still in hand. "Reverend Blackwell taught me." His wife left behind quite a library. Sam picked up one of the ledgers. His eyes widened as he saw her neat calculations, the discrepancies she'd marked in red ink. Thompson's been stealing from us. For 3 years. Nearly $4,000 total. Sam stared at the evidence spread across the table. How did you figure this out so fast? I've been watching this ranch my whole life, watching how things work, how they break down. Numbers don't lie if you know how to read them. The memories surfaced like smoke from dying embers. Delilah May was 12, hiding behind her mother's skirts in the general store. Her mother worked as a midwife then, one of the few jobs available to a woman of her station. Old Mrs. Henderson was crying over her account books. Her husband had died the previous winter, leaving her with a failing farm and debts she couldn't understand. Delilah May's mother couldn't read well, but she had something better, a mind that could see patterns, connections, solutions that others missed. She'd learned it from her own mother, who'd learned it from hers. Numbers are like people, her mother had whispered that day. They tell you stories if you listen close enough. Mrs. Henderson's books were a mess, but Delilah May saw the pattern even at 12. The farm wasn't failing. The bookkeeper was cheating the widow, marking up prices and pocketing the difference. Her mother confronted the man publicly. He left town that same week. Mrs. Henderson kept her farm. That night, Delilah May's mother sat her down with the Reverend's arithmetic books. Knowledge is power, child, but only if you know how to use it. Now, 15 years later, she was using it. The next morning, Sam presented the evidence to his father. Big Zeke's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. Thompson was gone by noon. Within a week, Delilah May had reorganized the entire supply system. Orders arrived on time. Waste dropped by half. The ranch hands started bringing their problems to her instead of to Big Zeke. She found Marcus, a former slave, struggling to read a supply list. Instead of embarrassing him, she quietly offered to teach him letters in the evenings. Word spread. Soon she had 6 students meeting in the barn after dinner. Sam watched it all with growing amazement. This wasn't the grateful, invisible bride he'd expected. This was someone with skills he'd never imagined. "Where did you learn about ranch management?" he asked one evening. "Same place I learned about people, by watching, listening, paying attention when everyone assumes you're too stupid to understand." The town began to notice changes. Supply wagons ran on schedule. Ranch hands looked happier. Word filtered back to Cedar Ridge that things were running smoother at the Thornfield place. Some folks credited Sam with finally growing up. Others whispered that Big Zeke had found some new management trick. Nobody suspected the fat girl from the seamstress shop, but Sarah Collins noticed. So did Victoria Hartwell. They watched from their parlor windows as Delilah May transformed from town joke to ranch manager in less than 2 weeks. The banker paced his office like a caged animal. His daughter should have been planning a wedding. Instead, she sat at home while that woman made herself indispensable to the richest family in the county. "This won't stand," he told the mayor over whiskey. "She's getting ideas above her station." The mayor nodded grimly. Ideas are dangerous things, especially in the wrong sort of person. They began making plans of their own. The rain stopped falling in May. By June, the creek beds showed muddy bottoms instead of flowing water. July brought dust devils and dying grass. August arrived with the stench of desperation. Delilah May stood on the ranch house porch, watching Big Zeke pace like a caged wolf. 3 neighboring ranchers had already abandoned their land. The Henderson place sat empty, windows boarded up like dead eyes. Sam rode in from the south pasture with news that made his father's face go gray. 15 head of cattle found dead near the dried creek bed. More would follow if water didn't come soon. "We'll have to sell the herd at whatever price we can get," Sam said. "Cut our losses before we lose everything." Big Zeke slammed his fist against the porch rail. 40 years I've built this ranch. 40 years, and now it'll die because the sky won't give us rain." The town meeting that night filled the church to overflowing. Ranchers, farmers, shopkeepers, and their families packed the pews. Worry hung in the air, thick as summer heat. Mayor Hartwell stood at the pulpit like he was delivering a funeral sermon. We're facing the worst drought in living memory. Our options are limited. The banker suggested moving operations east where water was more plentiful. Half the room erupted in angry shouts. These people had roots here, graves here, memories built into every fence post and foundation stone. Old Pete Miller claimed his grandfather's spirit told him to dig deeper wells. Someone laughed bitterly. They'd already dug 3 new wells that came up dry. Reverend Blackwell proposed organized prayer meetings. The desperate nodded. The practical folks looked skeptical. Arguments broke out between neighbors. Families split on whether to stay or go. The meeting dissolved into chaos before any real solutions emerged. Delilah May sat in the back row, listening to the panic and watching the fear spread like wildfire. She'd stayed quiet through the whole meeting, but her mind was working. After the crowd dispersed, she approached Mayor Hartwell near the church steps. "I might have an idea." He looked down at her like she was a child who'd interrupted adult conversation. "This is a serious matter, Miss Washington. It requires serious minds." The dismissal stung, but she pressed forward. "My mother used to tell stories about hidden springs, places where water flows underground, invisible unless you know how to look." The mayor's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Folk tales won't save our cattle?" Big Zeke had overheard. He walked over with Sam trailing behind. "You got something useful to say, speak up." Delilah May straightened her shoulders. Every eye in the remaining crowd fixed on her. The old survey maps from when this territory was first settled. They marked geological formations, underground streams, places where the earth holds water deep down. "Maps can't make water appear where there isn't any," the banker scoffed. "But they can show you where it's hiding." The memory came flooding back like water through a broken dam. Delilah May was 8 years old, following her mother to the Crow Reservation. Most folks in Cedar Ridge avoided the natives, but her mother went there regularly. The tribal midwife had skills that white doctors lacked. That summer was dry too, though not as bad as this one. The reservation well had run low. Children were getting sick from drinking muddy water. The tribal elders gathered around a woman named Singing Bird, who was older than the hills and twice as wise. She spoke in mixed English and Crow, gesturing toward the landscape with gnarled fingers. "Earth remembers water," she told Delilah May's mother. "Streams that ran before your people came, rivers that sleep under stone." Singing Bird walked across the reservation land with a strange, measured pace. She'd stop at seemingly random spots, press her ear to the ground, then shake her head and move on. Finally, near a cluster of cottonwood trees that shouldn't have been thriving in the drought, she smiled. "Here, water runs beneath, following the old path." They dug 6 feet down and hit a spring that had been flowing underground for decades. Clear, cold water that saved the reservation that summer. Singing Bird taught Delilah May's mother the signs. How cottonwoods and willows marked underground streams. How certain rock formations channeled water deep below the surface. How to read the land like a book written in stone and soil. Her mother had passed those lessons on during long walks around Cedar Ridge. They'd practiced finding the hidden signs, the secret waterways that most people never noticed. Now those lessons might save the town. "I know where to look," Delilah May said quietly. The crowd stirred. Some folks laughed outright. Others looked desperate enough to consider anything. Big Zeke studied her face like he was reading a contract. "You're talking about gambling everything on Indian superstition." "I'm talking about knowledge. Different from what you're used to, but knowledge all the same." Sam stepped forward. Over the past weeks, he'd learned not to underestimate his unexpected bride. "What do you need?" The old survey maps from the territorial office, a few men with shovels, and permission to try. The mayor started to object, but Big Zeke cut him off. "We're facing ruin anyway. Might as well try something different." 3 days later, Delilah May stood in a grove of struggling cottonwoods 2 miles north of town. The trees were dying, but they were dying slower than everything else. Their roots went deep, following moisture that surface eyes couldn't see. She knelt and pressed her palm to the earth, feeling for the subtle signs Singing Bird had taught her mother. The ground felt different here, cooler, more solid. "Start digging here." The men looked skeptical, but they started digging. 6 feet down, they hit wet earth. 8 feet down, clear water bubbled up from hidden springs. By sunset, they had enough water to fill every barrel in town. Word spread faster than wildfire on dry grass. The fat girl from the seamstress shop had saved Cedar Ridge. Water flowed from the hidden springs she'd found, filling troughs and barrels throughout the county. Delilah May woke the next morning to find a line of people outside the Thornfield Ranch. Farmers wanting advice about their own land, ranchers asking her to survey their property for hidden water sources, women who'd never spoken to her before offering shy smiles and grateful nods. Mrs. Henderson brought a fresh-baked apple pie. "My husband always said the smartest person in any room might be the quietest one." Even the banker's wife managed a stiff thank you, though her eyes held no warmth. But respect came with a price. Every success made certain people more uncomfortable. Mayor Hartwell paced his office like a caged animal. His niece Victoria had returned to San Francisco after Sam's shocking bride choice. Now that same bride was being hailed as the town's savior. "It's not natural," he told the banker over evening whiskey. "A woman like that shouldn't have such influence." The banker's face was purple with suppressed rage. His daughter Sarah had taken to her room with mysterious headaches ever since the water discovery. "People are starting to ask her opinion before they ask ours. That's dangerous." They watched through the office window as Delilah May walked down Main Street. Ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully. Shopkeepers came out to thank her again. Children followed her like she was the Pied Piper. "She's getting ideas above her station," the mayor muttered. "Ideas are like weeds. Let them grow unchecked and they'll choke out everything decent." The banker leaned back in his chair, calculating. "My loans keep half this town afloat, including some of Zeke's recent debts from that cattle disaster. What are you suggesting?" "Financial pressure has a way of changing people's priorities. Even Zeke Thornfield can be reasonable when his wallet's threatened." Meanwhile, at the ranch, Delilah May had transformed from invisible seamstress to indispensable partner. She managed supply orders, settled disputes between workers, and taught evening reading classes in the barn. Sam found himself watching her with growing amazement. This wasn't the grateful, compliant wife he'd expected when he made his calculated choice. "You realize you've made yourself the most powerful woman in 3 counties, he said one evening. Delilah May looked up from the lesson plan she was writing. 6 more families had asked her to teach their children to read. Power was never the goal. Respect was. You've got both now. She set down her pencil. Respect can disappear faster than morning dew. I've learned not to take anything for granted. Their relationship had shifted from convenient arrangement to genuine partnership. Sam no longer saw her as a means to an end. She'd become someone he actually looked forward to talking with each evening. Big Zeke struggled with his own transformation. 40 years of running things his way, and now his son's bride was proving more capable than any foreman he'd ever hired. He watched her settle a heated argument between 2 ranch hands using nothing but common sense and fair judgment. Both men walked away satisfied with her decision. "Never thought I'd say this," he told Sam later, "but that woman's got more sense than most men I know." The admission came hard. Zeke had built his identity on being the smartest, toughest, most capable man in the county. Accepting that a woman he'd initially dismissed might surpass him required swallowing pride bigger than Texas. But the ranch had never run smoother. Profits were up. Workers were happier. Even the cattle seemed healthier under her management systems. The evening reading classes grew from 6 students to 20. Former slaves learning letters alongside ranch hands' children. Mexican workers studying English next to farmers' wives who'd never had schooling. Delilah May had created something unprecedented in Cedar Ridge, a place where knowledge mattered more than social standing. The banker watched these developments with growing alarm. Education made people harder to control. Questions led to demands. Demands led to changes that threatened established order. He called in favors from business partners in neighboring towns, whispered concerns about radical elements disrupting traditional values, suggested that certain influences might be dangerous to community stability. The pressure campaign began subtly. Supply deliveries to the ranch faced mysterious delays. Loan payments that had been flexible suddenly required strict schedules. Business relationships that had operated on handshake agreements demanded written contracts with unfavorable terms. Big Zeke found himself fielding questions from longtime associates. Was it true his ranch was now run by his son's bride? Were the rumors about her taking over accurate? The doubts spread like poison in a well. People who'd praised Delilah May's water discovery began whispering about her unnatural influence over the Thornfield men. Sarah Collins emerged from her room long enough to spread carefully chosen rumors at the ladies' auxiliary meeting, nothing direct enough to be challenged, but pointed enough to plant seeds of concern. "I just worry about poor Sam," she said with practiced sympathy. "Men can be so easily manipulated when they think they're being clever." Victoria Hartwell sent letters from San Francisco describing unfortunate situations in other towns where women had gained inappropriate authority over local affairs. The Whisper campaign gained momentum. Store clerks grew cooler toward Delilah May. Some parents stopped bringing their children to evening classes. The line of people seeking her advice dwindled to a trickle. But the real blow came when the banker cornered Big Zeke in his office, surrounded by ledgers and loan documents. "I've been patient about your recent difficulties, Zeke. The failed cattle drive, the mounting debts. But my investors are getting nervous about your ranch's unusual management situation." Zeke's jaw tightened. "My ranch runs better than it has in years." "That may be, but perception matters in business, and people are talking." The banker slid a document across the desk. "Either you regain proper control over your household, or we'll need to discuss calling in some loans. Your choice." Big Zeke stormed into the ranch house that evening, like thunder before lightning. His boots echoed against the wooden floors as he searched for Delilah May. He found her in the kitchen, teaching Marcus to write his name. "Pack up your books. No more teaching. No more managing my business. No more making decisions without my permission." The words hit like physical blows. Marcus gathered his papers with shaking hands and hurried out the back door. Delilah May sat perfectly still, her face revealing nothing. What changed? "I'm losing control of my own ranch. People are talking, saying you've got me and Sam wrapped around your finger. People have always talked about me. Why does it matter now?" Zeke's face darkened. "Because now they're threatening my loans, my livelihood, everything I've built." Sam appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. He took in the scene with growing anger. "So you're going to throw away the best thing that's happened to this ranch because some narrow-minded fools are uncomfortable? Watch your tone, boy. I'm still your father. And she's going to be my wife, the woman who saved this town from drought, who turned our failing ranch into the most profitable spread in the county." Zeke pointed a thick finger at his son. "That's exactly the problem. She's gotten too big for her britches. People don't like it when the natural order gets turned upside down." The argument escalated until Reverend Blackwell arrived unannounced. The elderly preacher stood in the kitchen doorway, his presence immediately calming the storm. "Zeke Thornfield, I need to speak with you. Privately." Zeke started to object, but something in the Reverend's tone made him reconsider. They walked to the study, leaving Sam and Delilah May in tense silence. The Reverend closed the study door and fixed Zeke with eyes that had seen 60 years of human folly. "I know why you're here," Zeke said before the old man could speak. "Going to tell me I'm being unfair, that I should stand up to the pressure. Actually, I came to tell you about a promise you made 23 years ago." Zeke's bluster died. Something cold moved through his chest. Martha's deathbed. You remember that night. The memory rose unbidden. Martha Thornfield lying pale as winter snow, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. The doctor had left. Even Sam was asleep in the next room. Only the three of them remained. Zeke, his dying wife, and Delilah May's mother. "Promise me," Martha had whispered. promise you'll watch over Lily's daughter, protect her like she was your own." Lily Washington sat beside the bed, tears streaming down her face. She'd delivered Sam 17 years earlier, saving both mother and child when complications nearly killed them both. She'd been Martha's friend ever since, the only person who could make the lonely rancher's wife laugh. "She saved my life," Martha continued, each word an effort. "Saved our son. Now you save hers." Zeke had nodded, desperate to give his wife peace in her final moments. "I promise. The girl will always have my protection." Martha died 3 hours later. Within a month, Zeke had convinced himself the promise was fever talk, grief talking, not a real obligation. But Reverend Blackwell had been there. He'd witnessed the vow. Now the old preacher pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. Martha wrote it down too, her final wishes, including instructions that if anything happened to the Washington family, you'd step in. Zeke unfolded the paper with trembling hands. His wife's careful script covered the page, her words, her hand, her seal at the bottom. "I kept this safe all these years, hoping you'd remember your promise without needing reminders. But it seems the banker's threats have made you forget your honor." The study fell silent except for the ticking clock on the mantel. Zeke read Martha's words over and over, each sentence hitting like a physical blow. He'd broken his promise to his dying wife, abandoned his obligation to the woman who'd saved Martha's life, let fear and pride override the most sacred vow a man could make. "She doesn't know," he whispered. "Delilah May has no idea about the promise. She succeeded entirely on her own merit, without claiming the protection you owed her." Zeke sank into his chair, the weight of 23 years of broken promises crushing down on him. In the kitchen, Sam paced like a caged wolf, while Delilah May sat motionless at the table. "I won't let him destroy what you've built here," he said. "Maybe he's right. Maybe I've overstepped." Sam stopped pacing. "You saved this town, this ranch. How is that overstepping?" "Because I'm not supposed to be capable of saving anything. I'm supposed to be grateful for scraps and keep my mouth shut. That's not the woman I've come to know." For the first time since his father's explosion, Delilah May looked directly at Sam. "What woman have you come to know?" The question hung between them, loaded with weeks of growing respect and partnership that neither had expected. "Someone stronger than anyone in this county, smarter than my father or the banker or the mayor. Someone who sees solutions where others see only problems. Someone you could actually marry, not just use for convenience." Sam's answer came without hesitation. "Someone I'd be honored to marry." The study door opened. Zeke emerged looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Behind him, Reverend Blackwell wore the expression of a man who'd delivered difficult but necessary truth. Zeke walked straight to Delilah May. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of long overdue confession. "I owe you an apology, and an explanation, and a debt I should have acknowledged 23 years ago." Big Zeke's confession filled the kitchen like water breaking through a dam. 23 years of broken promises spilled out in halting sentences. Martha's deathbed plea, the sacred vow to protect Delilah May, the cowardice that made him forget his honor when grief clouded his judgment. Delilah May listened in stunned silence. Her mother had never mentioned any promise, never claimed special protection or favors from the powerful rancher who'd let them struggle in poverty while his conscience slept. "Your mother saved my wife's life," Zeke continued, his voice thick with shame. "Saved my son, and I repaid that debt by turning my back when you needed help most." The weight of revelation settled over the room. Sam stared at his father with new understanding. This wasn't just about business pressure or social expectations. This was about a man finally confronting his deepest failure. "I can't undo 23 years of neglect," Zeke said. "But I can honor my wife's memory starting now." He walked to his desk and pulled out the loan documents the banker had pressured him to sign. Without hesitation, he tore them in half. "Let him call in his loans. Let the whole county gossip. You've earned your place in this family through your own merit, not because of any old promise. The banker's rage could be heard 3 blocks away when Zeke delivered his decision the next morning. Threats flew like bullets, demands for immediate payment, warnings about financial ruin. Zeke listened calmly, then placed Martha's letter on the banker's desk. My wife asked me to protect that young woman. I failed her once. I won't fail her again. You'll lose everything over some sentimental nonsense. Then I'll lose it with honor intact. Word of the confrontation spread through Cedar Ridge faster than news of the water discovery. The banker's threats backfired as people remembered their own debts to Delilah May. She'd saved their town, their livelihoods, their futures. Marcus organized the ranch hands. If Mr. Zeke faced trouble for standing by Miss Delilah, they'd stand by him too. Other workers joined them. Then their families. Soon half the county was choosing sides. Mayor Hartwell found his authority evaporating as citizens questioned his role in pressuring the Thornfields. Sarah Collins discovered that eligible bachelors preferred women with practical intelligence over pretty faces and bitter tongues. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning. Not the grand social event the banker's daughter might have expected, but a genuine celebration of partnership and respect. Delilah May wore her mother's best dress, altered to fit properly. Simple but elegant, like everything else about her approach to life. Sam stood beside her in his father's wedding suit, his eyes holding warmth that surprised even him. The church overflowed with people who'd learned to see past appearances to substance underneath. Ranch hands sat next to business owners. Former slaves shared pews with founding families. Children she'd taught to read scattered flower petals in the aisles. Reverend Blackwell performed the ceremony with obvious joy. He'd watched this remarkable woman grow from curious child to community leader. Now he was witnessing her receive the recognition she'd always deserved. Big Zeke gave the bride away with genuine pride. The man who'd once seen her as an inconvenience now publicly claimed her as the daughter he should have protected all along. "Take care of each other," he whispered, as he placed her hand in Sam's. "You're both stronger together than apart." The reception filled the town square. Tables groaned under food contributed by grateful families. Musicians played until stars appeared overhead. Dancing continued long past traditional bedtimes. Even the banker attended, his financial threats having crumbled when other investors saw the ranch's impressive profits under Delilah May's management. He offered stiff congratulations and privately wondered how he'd so badly misjudged the situation. Mayor Hartwell made a speech praising the couple's contributions to community prosperity. His words rang hollow to those who remembered his recent opposition, but political survival required flexibility. 1 year later, Thornfield Ranch stood as the most successful operation in 3 counties. The school Delilah May established had become a model for other communities. Children of all backgrounds learned together, preparing for a future where merit mattered more than prejudice. Sam and Delilah May worked as true partners in every aspect of their lives. Their marriage had grown from calculated convenience to genuine love built on mutual respect and shared purpose. The banker, now completely reformed in his public opinions, often sought Delilah May's advice on complex financial matters. Her insights had saved him from several costly mistakes. Sarah Collins had married a traveling merchant and moved to Denver, where her beauty attracted more appreciation than her personality. Victoria Hartwell sent wedding gifts from San Francisco, along with grudging admiration for Delilah May's accomplishments. Big Zeke had transformed from rigid patriarch to proud father-in-law. He introduced Delilah May as the smartest woman in 3 counties, and meant every word. Martha's portrait had been moved from the attic to the parlor, where it watched over a house finally filled with the harmony she'd always wanted. The evening reading classes continued in the ranch's new schoolhouse. Marcus now helped teach beginning students, his own journey from illiterate ranch hand to confident reader, inspiring others to believe in possibilities. Delilah May stood in her classroom one sunset evening, watching children and adults work together over their lessons. The fat girl nobody wanted had become the teacher everyone needed. The convenient bride had become the heart of a thriving community. Outside, Sam waited to walk her home through the town that had finally learned to see her true worth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that wisdom and dignity could triumph over prejudice and fear. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged,